Let's get started then. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. I am Paul Byrne, Research Data Services Librarian here at Syracuse University Libraries. My role is to help people with all things data, finding data, collecting data, analyzing data, reporting data, curating and publishing data, as many people are required to with various grants nowadays. Um, And of course, in terms of collecting data, Qualtrics is a very good tool for doing that. Um, I provide basic end user support for Qualtrics, SAS data, SPSS. Um, as I say, anything having to do with data. Um, I guess a little bit of housekeeping. As I mentioned, all of these sessions will be recorded. And as I get them processed, uh, I put them up on that Qualtrics page down, lower down, where you see the workshops. And each week I replace last year's class. So as I say, you can review and come back to it, and you're certainly welcome to, at some other time, point other people to it as well. Um, let's see, we'll be doing this every Thursday from 3 to 4 p.m. until the week right before Thanksgiving. So that's 7 sessions, including today. Before we start, are there any questions? Somebody had asked about closed captioning. You should be able to see those. You might need to turn it on your end. Um, all right, let's get started then. When you first log into Qualtrics, you'll see a page that might look similar to this. If you don't have any projects that you've started, you won't see anything here because they don't have anything to show you. And that's something about Qualtrics. As you do something that you start to do something that you've never done before, the page might look a little bit different than the next time you come in and do it a second time. But that's not really a big deal, but just something to keep in mind. Um, we'll talk about all of this in a moment, but the first thing that I want to show you is up here on the top right corner. This is the help, where you can get in. This is for notifications, and it's really, you won't get many things here. If somebody shares a survey with you, there'll be a notification here saying somebody shared with you, and you can click on it and get access to it. This thing called the switcher switches between the actual Qualtrics thing here and what they call the Customer Success Hub, which is all their various classes, more help, etc. What's really important up here is you'll see where it says My Account. You can just click on that. You'll see it says Account Settings, Refresh Account, and Log Out. Log out, you know what that means. Refresh account is sometimes as you're working through things, especially if you're, doing workflows and some other fancy, more advanced, complicated things, and it doesn't quite work. You keep doing it and it's not doing it. Sometimes it helps to just refresh the account, and that like resets everything. And then it might work again. So when all else fails, refresh the account. It's not going to delete anything. It's not going to, reset things. It's just going to get you back to kind of where you were before. What I do want very important to show you is under account settings. Um, and by default, you'll get into what they call the updated version. What I want you to do, though, is switch to the older version because there's something in there you can't get to in the new version. And the two important things here are the time zone. Um, a lot of things in Qualtrics depends on what time, like getting into the sign-in sheet, the sign-in survey here. If you had tried to do that, say 1 o'clock this afternoon, you would have gotten an error saying, oh, it's not ready until 2:45 or whatever I set it to. That timing is based on whatever your time zone is set here. And there are other things in terms of how long surveys are available for, what time you might send out emails to people, etc. And those times are all based on whatever is set here as your time zone. The other thing, and by default, is the user email defaults. And you should see your own email in here. You can change this really to whatever you like. And this is just when, as we get later on to doing distributing your survey, you'll see this will all come up in the header by default. And this is just, as it says, default from email, who it's coming from. If the person clicks reply, where does it go to? And these can be two different things. And the default from name. And it's just convenient if you're, a program director, staff, and you want your emails to come from your department rather than yourself, as I've done here. By default, this would have been PH Byrne and Paul Byrne in here, but I reset it to Research Data Services. This grant login access, if you need help directly from Qualtrics, sometimes they need to actually get into your account to see what you're doing or what might be going on. And they'll tell you that they won't ever just go in. You have to grant them access. And this is where you'll do that and for how long you want to grant them access. Should always send me an email first before trying to get into Qualtrics or going directly to Qualtrics support, because usually I can answer your questions faster. I've heard some people have had to wait quite a while for some of their questions directly from Qualtrics support. Link account you'll probably never use. And that's just so that you can link two different accounts. It's really more for business users. And you can always go back to the new version. And it's just, there really isn't anything different here. There's the login access. The only thing that's not here is the time zone. Why it's not there, I don't know. But that's the way they did it. Okay, so we'll go back to where we were. And as I mentioned, this is the main page when you first come into Qualtrics. This is what you'll see. There'll be a list of various projects that you've been working on. Over here, your active surveys, as you can see, the sign-in that we did and registration, etc. Excuse me. You can customize this page if you like. You just click on this little gear here and pinned widgets if you have dashboards. Um, it'll show active surveys. I suggest that. Workflows summary, unless you have a lot of workflows going, it's really not that useful. And the directory summary um, just shows the directories where you have people's emails. We'll be talking more about that later on when we talk about distributing your survey. And you can have uh, summaries of what's been going on through those as well. The other thing that you'll see on every page is up here. This is your home page, as it says. There's a projects, catalog, workflows, data, directories, and library. We'll take a look at these. Projects are exactly that. It's all your projects, all your surveys. You can put things in folders, and if you have a lot, I suggest doing that. It helps keep them better organized. You see down here, you can create a new folder. Things that are shared with you, all project types, etc. You sort on the columns. There's also project options. And this is just collaborate. You can share it with somebody else within Syracuse University. Rename it, copy it, move it to a different folder, and all these other things. And another gear icon to decide, which columns you want to see. Catalog is, you'll see this whenever you start a new survey. Qualtrics has all kinds of pre-made surveys that you can start with and edit to your liking. 99% of people I've worked with will start their own survey from scratch. But just so that you know, there's a whole bunch of things in here that you can start from. Workflows, we have an entire class just on workflows. Workflows are doing tasks and other once the survey has been completed or at certain times. A very common one is adding people to a directory list or sending an email to the respondent. This data one you probably won't look at much. This is for creating data sets to pull in other information, and I don't know anybody who's using these. As you can see, I'm not using it. Directories are just lists of people to whom you can send emails. And when we do distributing your survey later on, we will go through creating these and creating the lists and how to use these. And then library. You can keep entire surveys in a library, your own surveys, something that you've done. So if you're doing, say, a survey of freshmen every, say, semester or every year, you can create that survey, say for 2025, put it in this library, and then next October, when you want to do it in 2026, you can start with that um, survey and just make the slight changes, couple of changes here and there that you would need to make it appropriate to 2026 without having to restart or redo the entire survey again. It'll make more sense when we really start getting into it, but you can put in, instead of a whole survey, just a block of questions or even a single question. As you can see, I have some graphics in here that you can put into your survey. Messages, so that if somebody comes into your survey too soon, it'll say, sorry, you can have it say, sorry, this isn't going to start until next Tuesday. Are there any questions? Okay. As I say, you start here. If you want to start a new survey, come down here and click Create a New Project. And you'll come to this catalog page that we just saw a couple of minutes ago. And you can start with any of these if you like. As I say, most people start with a survey from scratch, a blank survey. Come down here to get started. You can give it a name. Whatever you want to call it. You can put it in any project folder, any folder that you have. If you forget, don't worry about it. You can always move it later on. It's not a big deal. And then how do you want to start your survey? Either a blank survey project. You can import it from a QSF file. And we'll talk about importing and exporting in a later class. But if somebody, say, at another institution has done a survey and you want to copy it, you want to start with theirs, they can export it to a QSF file, email that file to you, and then you can import it and you have the survey already done, and then you can go in and make whatever tweaks or whatever you need. You can copy a survey that you already have, or you can pull in a survey from the library, as I just showed you a moment ago. Most of the time, people start with a blank survey. So we'll go to Create Project. And this right here is the meat of Qualtrics. We'll start with the new survey. It will have one default question because everything is, it's a survey. It's based on questions. And you can, of course, change these, which I will show you how to do. I think we start that the next week. But there are a few things that you want to do and set and decide before you start creating any of your questions. And one is to come over here to survey options. And under general, there's display name. This is the name that shows up here in the tab. Survey description, as it says in search results and social media posts. You can change the base language. It says configure it in the translations tab. Question numbers. By default, Qualtrics does not show the question number next to each question. Now, accessibility, which we're going to talk about a little bit more, says, yes, you should have the question numbers next to the question. And generally, that's okay. But if you're doing any kind of skip or display logic or branching through the survey flow, and especially if you're doing any kind of question randomization, that's going to throw off the number sequence, which will then confuse screen readers and people who use those, because the question numbers, Qualtrics, if you're randomizing your questions, Qualtrics will not renumber the questions on the fly. Question 5 will be always question 5, no matter where it ends up in that randomization. I recommend keeping expert review on. We'll see that in a moment. It's just a way of helping you take a quick look at your survey and see what might need a little bit of tweaking.
Paul,
Yes.
if you're using skip logic, do you want the question numbers to be off still or on? Because we
You
have a lot
would,
of surveys that they do skip logic with. So would
yeah,
I?
you would want them to be off, because otherwise the question numbers will
Oh,
be off.
okay.
They won't
Yep.
be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They'll be 1, 2, 5, 6,
Okay.
because you skipped those questions.
Okay. Thank you
Um,
much.
yep. A lot of things in terms of accessibility, I'm all for it. It should always be your default. But there are times, and we're going to talk more in a moment, where it's really a judgment call. The new survey taking experience. I strongly suggest turning this on, because, as it says, better usability for mobile platforms, which a lot of the students are doing, and other people. It's better in terms of accessibility, and there's more features and things. Eventually, the new survey taking experience is going to be the default. So as you're starting new surveys, it should be on. One caveat or caution is, if you have a survey that's already created, changing this might throw some things off. If you're using JavaScript or custom style sheets, those might not work anymore. Certain types of questions are not accessible, and so they won't work anymore. You can always turn it back off for that particular survey, and hopefully it will go back to working again. But if you've already created any of that kind of thing, just leave it on the current or the old survey taking experience. If you're starting fresh, turn it on, and this says all the stuff that I just talked about. Responses. Do you want them to have a back button so that they could go back in the survey? Allowing respondents to finish later. This applies more to people who are using an anonymous link, say a link that you post on a web page, rather than ones who you distributed through a directory or mailing list. Those people will always be able to come back because they have their specific code or whatever to make sure that they get back to their survey. Custom error messages. If you need a custom, if you have some, and we'll talk about error messages, um, something that's a little bit more complicated, then you got to answer this question, or you put in letters instead of numbers, basic kinds of things. What to do with incomplete survey responses. This depends very much on how much time you want to give people to complete the survey. And I always recommend record it. Do not do delete. Don't let Qualtrics decide to delete your data for you. You can always go back into the data, and we'll see that in a few weeks, and delete it from there, or just ignore it. But always keep it on record. What you can do is decide how long you want to give people until you decide that it's considered incomplete. And that, what that is depends on what you're doing. There's no right or wrong answer necessarily for that. And whether or not that time limit is from when the survey started, when they first started it, or the last time they edited a response. And that's, especially if you have letting them finish later. Automatic survey, it lets everything be collected. Just leave it off. Survey availability. You can give a start and end time for when people can answer the survey. By default, it gives them a month. And you can change that to whatever you need. And as I mentioned before, when you're doing the account settings, that time zone, it's going, as you can see here, it's Eastern time. And it's based on your account settings. And you can change the expired survey message, which is just, sorry, it's over with. And for surveys that have been after it expires, or you've specifically made it inactive, what kind of message do people get from it? Under security, there's survey access available to anybody, or if it's invitation only, that means they have to get it from a directory, from an email sent through Qualtrics. Usually, you can just go ahead and do available to anyone. Password protection, this is okay. But the thing is, everybody gets the same password. So it might be okay for, a handful of people that you want to make sure those are the only people who look at it. As I say, it's everybody gets the same password, so that's not necessarily the strongest password. You can set it so that people have to come from a specific website, say your department website or something else, to be able to take the survey. If you turn that on, it's going to ask you for the URL that you want them to come from. If they come from a different URL, they won't be able to take the survey. Prevent multiple submissions. You typically want this on. And it just means that people can't keep taking the survey over and over again and uh, 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 and skew your results. And post-survey, prevent multiple duplicate detection. Says flag the response or do not record, not recommended. If it's not recommended, then why is it an option? But again, if you do this, you want it to flag the response, not bothering to record it. Bot detection, usually you want to keep that on. Same with the security scan. Prevent indexing is on by default, and it just means that if somebody's searching for something, say on Google, your survey won't pop up as a result in Google. And then you have all these random people answering your survey. You can upload files. There's a specific question to do that. And it's only users with permission to view the responses or anybody who has a link to the file. And that just depends on what you're doing. Anonymized responses. What this does is, by default, behind the scenes, Qualtrics automatically records the respondent's IP address, their location data based on the IP address, and any contact information that's being pulled in from the directory. If you turn that on, then none of this information gets recorded in the first place. That might be okay. Maybe not. IP address is considered personally identifiable information. So, if you're sitting in your office, your IP address can pinpoint your office and therefore you. So depending on, how sensitive your survey is, you might want to do that. If at some point, if you're working on a grant and you have to share or publish your data at some point later on, you can still have Qualtrics record all this. You just have to make sure that you take it out before you publish the data. And of course, if you are sharing or publishing your data, that needs to be in your consent statement, which of course has to be approved by the IRB. This contact info, as I say, that comes from the directory. If you specifically have a question asking somebody's name and phone number and address, Qualtrics sees that as just a regular question and will still be recorded. On my Qualtrics webpage, I have a couple of videos, video tutorials discussing anonymization in Qualtrics. So if you're doing something really sensitive and this is very important to what you're doing, I strongly suggest watching those videos to get a better idea of how different options in Qualtrics will affect the data that you get back out. And what to do at the end of the survey. You can send a thank you email. This only works if you've created a directory for your survey. message for revisiting, and all these things go into your library that I showed you before. Email triggers. This is really a holdover. This is to send somebody an email, whether it's the respondent or a program director or somebody. This kind of action should be done through a workflow rather than using the email triggers. They left this in because so many companies had so many of these already that they couldn't really just take it out. And the same with contact list. This used to be called contact list trigger. And it's a way of adding somebody to a contact list. And it says add contact list workflow, easier to go up into the workflows itself and do it from there. And we'll talk about this when we do distributing and contact lists and everything else. This last thing, scoring, you can actually create a test in Qualtrics. I have a video doing something with this. A lot of psychology, sociology, political science measures will need something like this to score the survey, or you're measuring somebody's anxiety, and different responses get different weights. You can do that with this. Okay, I think we did all of these, yes. The other thing I want to, that's quotas. What I want to show you right now is the look and feel. Because this is definitely something you want to set before you start building your survey, because making changes in the look and feel can throw things off quite a bit in your survey. Now, as you remember, we clicked on the new survey taking experience. And that's why some of these things are grayed out, because they don't work with the actual accessibility things. And so it's just a way of being able to look at your survey, what it's going to look like when people use it. You can come up here and see what it'll look like on a phone. You can do it with the survey you're working on or just a sample that they have. You might as well do it with the one you're working on. Syracuse Simple is the only one that's accessible, and that's the one you should be using, unless, of course, you have access to the School of Ed or one of these other ones. Under General, there's the next button, text. Accessibility says you use text instead of graphics, like an arrow or something. And you can just type it in there and say next. And you can have, a message or whatever in your library. I mean, it's just as easy to just type it in here. Previous button, if you've turned on letting people go back, you'll want this. Progress bar, by default, there is none. Now text, I'm going to bring it back here. And this is the progress bar without text. And then with verbose text, it just puts in percent completion. You can change whether you want that at the top or the bottom. Number of questions per page. If you don't put anything in there, Qualtrics will decide. You can, as we get into actually creating a survey, you'll see how Qualtrics will either, if you have blocks, it'll break it into the blocks, or you can put a page break, specifically put a page break in. Header and footer is exactly as you might think. It's the header and the footer, just like it would be like on a Word document. And motion. This is the page transition. My personal preference is leave it at none. So I find all these other things distracting when they do it in surveys. The page transition will just go to the next page rather than do some kind of fancy schmancy graphic type thing. So those are all the things that you want to set and decide upon before you really start building out your survey. Because as I say, a lot of these changes will, to use the technical term, mess things up if you do it halfway through or after your survey's already completed. Take a quick look at some of these other things. Quotas. Yes, let's save the changes. Quota is if you say you only want 50 freshmen or 50 people from each class, you can set it so that when the 51st freshman comes in, you can say, oh, thanks, we already have enough. And they get sent out of the survey. Translations, to translate, talked earlier about the base language, and there's a whole bunch in here. You can add languages or request a translation service that you have to pay for. If you are translating your survey and you yourself are not a native or very fluent speaker of the language to which you are translating, find somebody who is and have them go through it and make sure you're not insulting somebody's grandmother. Well, as I mentioned, we'll have a whole class on survey flow. This can be very, very useful. Go back here. I have a little bit more time. Click on preview. You get a preview of your survey. We'll talk a little bit more about this. You can restart it. You can put a bookmark. If you have a long survey, you don't want to have to keep going through, the first 5 pages of your survey to get to the part that you really want to look at and test. You can put a bookmark in it and it'll bring you right to where you want to be. Ignore validation can be useful. Or view the published version, etc. As I say, we'll talk more about this once we really start getting into um, creating surveys. This button over here called publish, it's kind of a misnomer. Really, it's just a way of saving everything that you've done as a full version. Um, Sometimes, especially if you're doing workflows, if you don't click to publish, then the workflow doesn't get, I guess, saved along with the survey. And so you could do a preview, and now the changes that you made in your workflow aren't doing anything. Publish does not necessarily mean it's going to go out to the world and people can start um, answering your survey. They won't be able to do that unless they have the link in the first place. But when you click on that, you get this. You get the expert review. You can view, there's no recommendations, but we're going to click on it anyway because it will tell you, will give you some suggestions. And some of these you really need to fix. If there's a, it says severe or whatever. Some you kind of have to take with a grain of salt. It will flag your survey if you have more than 3 text box type questions. And most surveys I've seen have more than 3 because there have to be more than 3 because of what you're doing. So it's often a suggestion. But all of these things are good because it will flag things that you might want to take another look at, especially with the accessibility. You can always check accessibility at any time. Just come down to review. And it brings you to the accessibility section of the expert review. Search and replace is exactly what you think it is. It's just like search and replace in Word or something. Strip formatting, we'll talk a little bit more. You can, if you copy and paste from Word or a web page, there's often code hidden behind that, and that can sometimes mess things up in the question. So you can highlight it and then strip the formatting and reformat it. And analyze survey is just the expert review. Okay. Are there any questions? Comments? That's all I planned for today. As always, I'll put my email in here. You probably already have it. You have questions during the week. You're more than welcome to contact me, and I will certainly do everything I can to help you. So that's that for today. Have a good week, everybody, and I'll see you next Thursday at 3 o'clock.